Hey, hello again, whiskey friends. Thanks for joining me today, everybody. And if this is your first time here, why don't you stick around, see if you like the vibe? We do this type of video every single Tuesday for a Tuesday whiskey discussion. Now, one of the things that we have been doing on the channel, I guess two things combined, is we have been meticulously reviewing bourbons all and whiskeys all year long using our new scoring system. And this scoring system is pretty meticulous, and it's pretty meticulous for a reason, because I really wanted to be able to essentially analyze the data as it comes in. And as Kelsey does reviews, as Darrell does reviews, we have guest reviews. But as people are filling out this form and giving me the information, I'm kind of getting to know a little bit about what kind of separates a good whiskey from an average whiskey, and what separates an expensive whiskey from a cheaper whiskey, and what are the characteristics and patterns that I'm seeing. And I thought it would be really interesting to break those down with you, because I have been on a journey here of essentially rediscovery of the $50, $30, $20 bourbons. I've been breaking those down because for the scoring system, I wanted to have good benchmarks. That way I could understand alternatives to things just in case we review something and you can't find it. Hey, here's a good alternative based on the scoring system. So, what I'm going to break down for today's discussion is what I have learned when it comes to expensive whiskeys versus cheaper whiskeys, and whether you should even care or not. What is your money actually going towards? And you might not even care what I have to say about what the more expensive whiskeys have to offer. So, I think that's going to be fun to break down. Let's kick off the show. All right. Well, while we're chatting today, what I'll be sipping on, because typically I just talk and talk and talk and never sip on it, but what I will potentially be sipping on is the Cooper's Craft 100 proof. Man, I've been enjoying this one. This is actually the first bottle of this I've ever bought. I'll probably go through another pour of it before I break down those final scores. But I've been having a fun time getting to know this one, man. Essentially a better Woodford Reserve, to be honest. Hmm. All right. One sip and then let's chat. Ah, so good. So, what we've been doing with the scoring system and the form that I have myself, Kelsey, Darrell fill out, it goes beyond just give me your reviews of the whiskeys. Like, I'm asking all types of questions, like what's the proof? What's the price? Was it a single barrel? Was it a group pick? Was it a store pick? What's the type? Was it finished? And my goal is to be able to break all this stuff down to see if I do see any patterns in the scores as time goes on. What I have noticed already, though, is that the more expensive whiskeys, there's a high variation in the scores. I mean, yes, one thing that has occurred is in the scoring system, if you want to get something that's scoring pretty much in the 80s to 90s, it's going to be a more expensive whiskey. It's probably going to cost $100 or more. The only one that I have that's kind of the breaking the trend on that is ECBP, since they're still holding those prices down around, 80, $70, depending on where you are. But that one definitely stands out as we get through more and more of these reviews. But ultimately, now that I've been on this quest to pretty much go through all of the standard lower price bourbons that I haven't explored in years, that's the one thing is like I I tasted some of these 3 years ago and I made an opinion about them. I have changed so much since then. So now going into it with fresh eyes has actually been pretty eye-opening, because I found myself even on a Friday when I'm drinking on my porch, going back to the lower price bourbons rather than the expensive ones. It's kinda like, "Man, why am I spending so much money on the expensive ones?" But I think what would be an interesting conversation is what is the difference that I am seeing in the scores between the more expensive bourbons that score high, because there's a lot that disappoint, but the more expensive bourbons that do score high versus where some of the more available bourbons are scoring in the scoring system. Ultimately, what I've seen is a clustering of scores where the cheaper bourbons are kind of landing really, really consistently between 65 and 75 on the scoring system, which is a good to a very good pour. Whereas we're finding some outliers, I mentioned ECBP, but there's been some other $100 plus bourbons that have scored 85, 95. What's the difference between those two? Well, what we're doing on the scoring system, just for a little background, is we are breaking down every component of the experience: the nose, the front of the palate, the mid palate, the finish, the balance and construction overall, the value overall. And even within those categories of nose, it's broken down into a flavor score and an experience component. That is the complexity in the case of the nose. What I am finding more and more is that the cheaper bourbons lose all of their points on the nose and on the complexity. But when it comes to the flavors of mid palate and it comes to the flavors of the finish, they can still bring it to the game, man. So that is the first thing that really separates it. It's the nose. Some of these just don't have much on the nose compared to the whiskeys that I'm talking about. Now, what makes this interesting though, as I start talking about this, is, I know I'm over analyzing bourbons here. Like sitting down with the JTS Brown in a Glencairn for 20 minutes is probably not the thing that thing was designed for. Yes, I am overanalyzing them, but I'm overanalyzing them for a purpose. And what I'm beginning to realize is I think we could even have like a glass recommendation for pours, because if the nose isn't bringing it, but the taste is fine, who the frick cares? Just put it in a rocks glass. Go enjoy it out on the back porch in whatever glass you have. You don't need to take it down in a Glencairn. You don't have to overanalyze it like that. And that's the thing that I'm like kind of realizing through this is you can actually match the whiskey with the experience and then have a better experience from it. But the nose is one thing that does differentiate some of the more expensive whiskeys from the cheaper whiskeys. The other part of it is the depth of flavor and the complexity of the flavors. So mostly I have been finding that if you're paying $30, $20 for a bourbon, the depth of the flavors isn't necessarily as much as, say, what some of the more expensive whiskeys can offer. But even then, do you always want complexity of flavor? No. Sometimes you just want to relax and have fun and just taste something that tastes good. And that's the thing that's been messing with my head lately, because a lot of the bourbons that I have now, I didn't have on the shelf for a while. This started out as a problem. There's a couple videos on this where I did a $200 bourbon haul. I have bought a bunch of $20, $30 bottles since then too, to keep this train going and get this foundation of the scoring system going. Cooper's Craft is a good example of that. I never had this before. But what I'm finding more and more is like ever since I've gotten these cheaper bottles back on the shelf, I have not been going to the things behind me. Like when I'm just been relaxing outside and enjoying the sunset, I've just been grabbing something like Cooper's Craft, grabbing something like the GTS Brown, grabbing something like the Russell's 10-year, Russell's 6-year rye, the Evan Williams, the Knob Creek 9. I just keep going back to those lately. So my patterns have changed, but very unexpectedly. I did not expect to go through this kind of sea change experience where I was going to buy all these, and I was buying them mainly so I could serve them to company when they come over for parties and stuff like that. And now I'm the one going back to them. And of course, I'm going to drink them all. And then when people come over, there's not going to be anything accessible. And then I'm going to go through this whole thing again. That's a different story. But yes, ultimately, I guess my key learning in all this is maybe we could do a glass recommendation. What's going to maximize the experience of this thing? If it is low on the nose score and it's low on, the front of the palate score, most people don't even care. That's the thing. If it's good on the mid palate, it's good on the finish. Hey, there you go. So it could come with a glass recommendation. This is a Glen glass. This is a tulip glass recommendation. This is a rocks glass recommendation. I'll think about that one a bit more. Maybe that's something that we can incorporate. But that's been my ultimate finding on this is that, yes, the cheaper bourbons and ryes and whiskeys are scoring lower, but they're scoring lower for reasons people actually might not care about. Hmm. So, what we could do with this ultimately is take the scores later on and even just sum up the flavor experience or the mid palate experience, the finish experience, something. Find some other way to look at all the diagnostics that we have and rank the whiskeys that way and see what emerges, see what patterns emerge. Let's just ignore the nose. Maybe people don't care about the nose. Well, what's the ranking without the nose? Let's see. So that's something that I think we can do later. Got a whole lot of reviews to get through before we can get to that point. But interested to hear your reactions to this conversation. Ultimately, what are you sipping on? When are you sipping on something in a rocks glass versus a Glen? Are you consciously making that choice, or you just have a preference on the glass always being a rocks glass, always being a Glen? And then bring the right equipment to the right whiskey. What do you think of that idea too? Maybe that's a recommendation we can work into the channel. So love to hear your feedback on this particular topic and anything else that this stirs up. Put it in the comments and let's keep this discussion going. Thanks for joining me today, whiskey friends. I'll catch you on the next Whiskey Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
Jeff, just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you say hello again. Oh, Jeffrey, you should just be friends with me. But you have these whiskey friends, and you